Hello?
Hello.
Is it working?
Why is that red and not blue?
The fucking thing isn't plugged
You
in.
didn't plug it in.
Jesus Christ.
I'm working with amateurs.
You haven't literally done anything. In fact,
Yeah, I don't pretend to know how to do any of this stuff. It's not my...
I don't know either. Hello?
Hello.
Alright, I think we're good. Round 3. So we're trying something new here. We have a new set.
Yes.
I like it. It's not
Yeah.
too bad.
This is where we sit and do most of our chatting,
Yes.
conversing.
Welcome.
Not this close normally,
No,
Little
this
bit
is
of
way too
space.
close.
but
Yeah. So if you're just listening and you have no idea what we're talking about, go to YouTube, search, I guess it's Bill Anthony's,
you can search BTE
or just BTE podcast. Yeah.
podcast.
You'll be able to watch. The watching, I've gotten some feedback on the watching.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And people have said that they enjoy watching it because they get to see some of the
The expressions.
the judgment and the criticism coming
I
from
mean,
you.
mostly you don't have any expressions or facial.
But you have a lot.
I have a lot.
Right.
So that adds value.
Yeah. So
You're welcome.
there's that communication ad.
Update on the shirts. I think I had another idea.
These shirts.
I know. What was the one I came up with last night? I was really cracking myself up with it too.
Okay, so I can answer that by telling you this. And we'll actually talk about this today, about like progress and growth and stuff like that. I just got an office. I just rented an office. I just signed a lease for
What does that have to do with the shirt though?
because I said I was going to have an office holiday party.
Yes.
And I called it the company. I said a company
Yes.
holiday party. And you literally laughed in my face.
I did. But was that the shirt? We're really struggling with our memory. We need to do those memory
No,
games.
it was then because then you were saying about how I was going to invite people and lock everyone in and
Yeah, there was
some
another
sort
shirt
of saw
before then.
type thing.
Anyway, but yeah,
Come on.
so on to the topic today. We're talking about. I feel like we've been talking around. Obviously, a lot of this podcast is about growth. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of inherent in everything we're talking about. But I think today we thought we would specifically look at like, well, how do you grow, and what are maybe some things that like hold you back. And I think one of the common sentiments around growth, or what people might experience, is kind of like maybe it doesn't happen as fast as they like. Okay, I'm gonna make some changes.
Right.
I want to grow. I want to like learn. I'm gonna be this better version of myself. And then you get a couple months in, you're like, man, I'm kind of still
here.
Still struggling with the same shit. I read that book. I listened to that podcast. I did the work. But man, like, I still have the same problems.
Yeah.
And as we know, it's not just about reading a book or listening to a podcast, but even when you are working at growth, it's not an instant gratification situation. And there are different things that allow for growth and different times and different people. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today.
It's interesting. I never really thought of it like this before, but if you were to think about growth, like if you were to say, hey, I experienced growth in this capacity, in this domain, let's just say nutrition. Hey.
I think you should be closer.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
Am I closer? Anyway, if you were to say, hey, I experienced growth in this pursuit.
Right.
I would submit that it's usually looked back at, like it's retrospective. It's in the past. The growth occurred.
Not I am growing.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at that, like, hey, I want to have this growth. And yeah, I'm speaking for myself right now. Like, I want to have this growth. I feel like I haven't grown as much as I want, should. That's a whole separate bag of worms. But if we then kind of reach that friction point of questioning our growth, I think we can reposition and repurpose our perspective to be like, how am I growing right now? And I think comparing growth to growing takes this big thing of growth and kind of chops it down into like, okay, I'm growing. Like the little plant, right? It might have like a little bud or thing. It's not going to be a full on.
It's not going from a seed to a tree overnight.
Correct.
Right.
That should be a shirt.
Yes. So one of the things we, just to be transparent on this podcast, I think we try to do is offer some of our personal experience as a way to kind of let people in, describe, give a example, not just have it be like teaching, but like have a conversation about what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And I have found that often like listening to other people talk about their experience is helpful for me.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but the goal is for people to take that and apply it to their own experience. So you said, starting with kind of, if we're going to look at that growth, you recently got an office.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Talk to us about the office.
What do you want to know about the office?
What I want to know is so for you, let's talk about between the ears. That's like something you're looking at. That is something you're in the process of growing. That as a business, that's something that you have as a current like goal, something you're developing, you have goals for that.
Yes.
And so a lot has happened in the past year with that, but one of the things you kind of identified was this need for an office. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I don't think I actually said right away, like, I need an office. I wanted a space to help facilitate some of the work that I need to do in a manner that works with how I work.
Yeah.
Tried to do some stuff at the gym, not the right environment. Tried to do some stuff downstairs in the basement. Okay, good for like tasks and stuff. But some of the more creative endeavors that I need to do, and some of the writing and developing things out and just kind of letting it stew in like a protected space was absent. I've literally written the newsletter like in the car, like if people are coming over. So like it just felt like I didn't have any boundaries or any space that I could create as an environment to be that. That's not the kitchen table. That's not downstairs. That's not the bedroom. That's not,
And when do you feel like you kind of realized this wasn't working? Like the situation you had set up for yourself was really not conducive to you making progress. When do you think you realized that? How long ago?
I don't know. It was not recent. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So
I would say probably probably over a year, probably closer to 2 years. And it was probably when, I don't know. Yeah, it was probably about 2 years ago.
So, I think one of the things is with growth. So that, if you look at it as like, or in my mind when I'm looking at like, okay, well, you want to grow between the ears. Okay, that requires that there's some inherent work required. To do that work, there has to be this environment that's conducive to that. And so you identify there's a problem. The solution to growing between the ears is find a better space. Seems simple.
Yeah.
Why do you think it took so long for you to actually sign a lease? Like to call somebody up to look like, I was thinking about the other day after you'd signed the lease, but just driving along on my way to the gym, and I must have seen 10 signs, little buildings, office for lease.
Yeah, because you're looking for them.
Right. So it's not like it's not like we're looking for a new gym space where it's like, wow, that's going to be tough. So what do you think it was that kept you from, like, I know this is going to help between the ears grow.
Yeah.
Just do it.
I think one of them was financial, and insecurities about that, or being a bit more conservative, say, than you. Maybe less of a risk taker in that regard.
But
And
is that only financial?
no, well, no. I mean, just
Yeah.
so I was thinking like, okay, I'm between the ears. It's no surprise. It's like not a big money maker, you know, right? Like we're not gonna pay the house off with between the ears this year or anything. It's
Not this year.
definitely not this year. Definitely not this year. So I guess to say like it's not like there's this steady stream of revenue like a traditional business
Like
would
you
have.
felt like you could, what's the word?
I don't know. I can't help you.
Justify, like, okay.
Yeah, so like there's not
this
like there's not
expense
as
my business can justify.
Right.
You didn't feel that way.
Yeah, I didn't think that I was in a position, frankly, that I earned the right to have an office.
Which is an interesting thing.
Yeah,
with you, earning and deserving things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, the easy thing to say is, well, there was a financial component, but it wasn't just about dollars and cents. Right. So I felt like that was a consideration. I felt like I should, in air quotes, be able to, if this is like kind of my best work and what I feel like is my purpose and a way to serve, like I should be able to do that anywhere. Yeah. And so I don't know if I would say pride or ego. I think I subscribe to probably a misleading belief or a false kind of litmus test kind of deal.
And then the other thing I think that's a big thing for you, kind of to the point of like that we've kind of hit on, is one of the things you do struggle with is that, and you've said it, like the paralysis by analysis. So
for sure.
all of those things just going around in circles into the decision making matrix, and not that combined with not being a risk taker and like not feeling like you deserve it, like pulling the trigger on that is hard.
Yeah. And what's funny, like when I think about like not being a risk taker and then I do a quick check of things I've done in my life, it's like, okay, not necessarily true,
Right.
but what it is with certain decisions where frankly the risk isn't like, what's the greatest risk? Well, the greatest risk is that for getting this office that I'm out whatever, right. You know, the financial element, like really, like that's
the risk.
That's really the only risk. And
so do you think it's because the risk is actually too small?
Yeah.
Like it's not like
it's not like it's life or death.
Right.
And sometimes, and maybe this is because of my past experiences and just kind of levels of operation, like talk to me when it's dire. Talk to me when it's life or death. And you've said that with like,
you've said that with a lot of things. Like it's harder for you to, if there was more of a dire situation, you'd probably just act.
Like that's when I show up. Yeah.
So part of like us talking about this is just the point of, just because we know like areas of our growth or areas for growth, or okay, like what can help us, it doesn't always mean it's an instant like, okay, now I know and now I'm gonna act. So
right.
What was something that helped you finally, like, what do you think happened? What was that shift where you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this?
Well, I would just, before I answer that, I would just echo what you said, and I've said this to so many people. We've talked about it a lot. It's not for lack of knowing.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, it's not for lack of information. Like we know a ton. We know a lot. That's the relationship between the rational mind and the emotional mind. And that highway, that exchange between the two, the translation, however we want to talk about the link between what we know and what we feel, that is where I think the gold is.
Right.
Not like, you know, that kind of gold, but like that's where the real essence of between the ears actually lies. It's not about doing an event. It's not about all night stuff. It's you I've had people think that I'm going to do like crazy things, illegal things to them. It's not that. I'm not yelling at you. It's providing the stage for you to see what actors are rational, which actors are emotional, what's the script like, and like kind of that whole thing. So for me, I think I'm not gonna say like I hit rock bottom, but I really came to to feel, not know, but feel like there's no way I'm going to be able to push forward and accomplish what I want to do, which is ultimately serve people so that they can live like a fully engaged life and progress and everything, if I don't make a change.
Right.
And so you are obviously an advocate for me getting an office. You've been pushing me. You've been suggesting it. You've been whatever. You talked to Joe, who talked to her person, had an exchange. So I got a contact, and then but I got that contact like a month before I called. Yeah. And then whatever, we were going through some stuff and just trying to kind of find our way and make sense of where we're at, what we're doing. We question a lot, and I think we talked about raising awareness last time as not always a good, not always a pleasantry.
Right.
And so we're kind of on a continuous elevation of our own awareness. And so I was driving home from maybe coaching or maybe doing something, I don't know what it was, and called the guy and said, hey, can we meet? And he said, yeah, when are you free? He said, let's go tomorrow. And I pretty much knew whatever I first saw I was going to sign. Because, what is there?
Right.
And
so I think, as you said, hitting rock bottom, I don't know that it's, and like you said, it's not that you did that. I think for some people, you do kind of get to eventually a fork in the road. And so sometimes you have to get to that point to really choose the growth. Okay, I'm there. Because I think for you, it was sort of okay, I know this thing could help me. I'm either going to choose it and see where I can grow, or not and be I'm done. But knowing that having a little bit of a pivotal moment. So now I think what's cool is okay, so you're in that growth. It doesn't mean that now you got the office, you've just had a day of everything just got instantaneously better. No. But you took a step forward. You're kind of in that, you've set up the environment, you've set yourself up for success to then enable that growth and the things that follow. But it's interesting because it did take you kind of breaking free of some of the stuff you kind of always do, the paralysis by analysis or the not feeling like you deserve it, well, I'm going to use this money for this and it could be used for something else. That's where you've gotten very familiar with those things because they've been there for a long time. And kind of deciding, I don't think it's necessarily that those things go away, but building awareness around them and saying okay, I'm not going to choose to let that control my decisions. They might not be gone.
Right, but that's the part that I think is super important to be very clear about. It's not to say I'm going to ignore those.
Right.
It's not to say I'm going to never have them occur because I can't, they're going to happen. And it's not going to avoid them.
Right.
It's about being able to understand and work with them. And that is where the real power is. And that ability to objectively, or as close to objectively as you can, within yourself, have the awareness to recognize something, to see it for all that it is, and all that it isn't, and then make a decision for yourself. That, in essence, is really what all of this is about. And so, yes, when I start getting paralysis by analysis, I am guilty I am very much a victim of paralysis by analysis. I struggle with that tremendously. Why does it come up? This and that. Yeah, sure, I can rationalize away, but the fact remains, it's a consistent thing that I bump up against. So looking at life hacks and tips and tricks to avoid it, I'm not of the belief that avoiding things fixes them.
Right.
Like, then you're just playing hide and seek. And you're always going to get found. This stuff is always going to find you, which is why I keep saying, like, you have to find yourself first and rediscover yourself, reintroduce yourself, get to know yourself better. I mean,
so instead of ignoring it, it's seeing it.
Yeah, and there's a whole
choosing to so not to simplify it, but for people that are thinking like, well, I have to like fix this before I can experience growth. I think that's
the trap.
Yeah, that's the trap. And there's just things, recently we had one of the calls for the practice, and someone we were discussing that about kind of when you journal, like, man, the same thing. And looking back, like, I'm still dealing with this, and it's been however many years, it's still there.
Yeah.
And I think once you can kind of accept that and know that it's not like growth can't happen until you fix that, because that's just not that's not realistic.
Yeah, and then you look into, it's not realistic. And this morning when I was journaling, I wrote some stuff that I'm like, and I even wrote like, wow, I am still questioning this stuff. I'm still writing about this stuff. It might sound like a broken record, but it's not. It's not. And the fact that you're repeating it is potentially what you have to do to look at it through all different angles, through all different parts of life, because you've changed, your life has changed. And could you imagine not cleaning that out, not addressing that? What are you going to do? You're just going to bury it,
well,
bury
a lot
it,
of people
bury
do.
it, bury it.
And then finally it becomes like a zombie that comes up
and I get it. Like that happens. And you are not either casting judgment on that. We're here just with like a big old spotlight though, saying like, hey, we might be able to find our way.
Right.
And
I mean, I think, I'm thinking of like, okay, so what are current, in terms of like, well, what are things we do? The other piece of that is, what's interesting is like, there's things we know that help us to do that, to kind of uncover and flush out those things. And often we avoid them. Like, maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's taking a day off. Maybe it, like for me, and we've talked about this, like for me, the thing that helps me a ton is going for a walk, usually like in the woods somewhere that's sort of free of people, taking the dogs usually, not with other people, not even with you, like just by myself.
For sure.
For an hour, just kind of letting thoughts come, not judging them. Sometimes I actually talk out loud to myself, but just like flushing that stuff out. And there'll be days where it's like a beautiful day. It's not like my schedule's packed. Why don't I go do that? And it's like, I don't know.
Well, why don't you? Like just wondering.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, then there's like, well, I could do this, I could do that. I should be doing something sort of like to your point, like, I could be working. Is that really the most valuable thing to do? Stop my life, spend an hour and a half walking the dogs. Because then when I come back, and then there's the kids, and then, you go through that thing. So some of that, and some of it is really like, to be honest, like, I don't know if I want to look at it right now. Like, what am I going to uncover? What am I going to...
But surely not every time you go for a walk, it's like this.
No, but I'm not sure why. Laziness? Yeah. Like, I really have no idea. But there's things we know that help. Like, why people know they should exercise. Yeah. Why don't they?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know.
Good luck. So, if you can figure that one out.
Yeah, so I think it's also just highlighting it's normal to
it's
figure out what works for you and still be like, oh my gosh. Like every time people embark on eating well, right? This is like a great example.
Okay, fine.
People are like, I'm going to eat well. A lot of people at the gym like a challenge. They like a group. They like, and I understand it. Yep. We as people need like that camaraderie. Like, yep. I'm going to commit. I'm accountable. And then inevitably somebody falls off the wagon. and it's that on and off. But what's funny is when people get back into it, they're like, wow, like this feels great. I feel great. Why did I not eat well before? Why did I stop this?
Yeah.
But it happens, right?
Yeah,
We
of
all,
course.
and it's like, man, or
Everyone falls off. I mean, that was one of the podcasts a couple times ago. We talked about the value
Getting
of
back
falling
on.
off
Yeah, and getting back on.
Hopefully you don't like break every bone in your body when you fall off, but to the extent that you like are taking care of yourself, that's going to hedge
Yeah.
that. I think that, and this is just my observation, when we really measure it, and when we're really like all of these criteria and rubric and the decision making matrix, it's set up to fail. And why should you go walk? Well, so anyway, so when we measure, we look at time and comparison. The third one would be a number in there. So times, and for like the gym or whatever, but like metrics. Am I really gonna go walk for hour and a half? Okay, boom. You've already sort of like put a metric to it, put a number to it. When I could be doing,
comparison.
so now you've compared. And is it going to, be the best use of my time? So we're back to the time thing. Take that, run that through. If you know something, if you're listening to this, and you know something that helps you,
Right.
but you also know you're not doing it. Like, be honest with the decisions of why, and
Sure.
be okay with yourself too. Like, this isn't to like, self defeat yourself. This is to grow. Those decisions to not do something that you know is going to be helpful for you. Apply the lens of, am I assigning numbers, comparing, or really that's the big two, numbers and comparing. And then consider, what would it look like without those? So instead of putting, and those are rational things. Doing work is better than walking in the woods. Not doing work. That's like a rational comparison and way to stratify like value.
Which is really like, that's part of current, or at least where we live. Everything is like efficiency, maximizing. It is a rubric.
It is, and and I'm gonna write the newsletter about this. But like, I'm tired of hearing and saying how busy we are. I'm absolutely tired of it, and I'm gonna throw up a challenge out there for the rest of the year. Stop saying busy.
Right.
Now, if it was like, if somebody says, "Hey, was it a busy weekend?" I would even say, don't say yes. Tell them, use an attribute. Busy is just a meaningless nothing word.
Yeah, what does that mean?
What does it mean? Anyway, so we're doing something, or we're not doing something that we know is good for us. What's it look like? What is the environment within myself? What's the communication, the self-communication that's present when I don't do something I know I should do? If you can find a number, if you can find a comparison, be like, oh,
so let's
interesting.
use something one of us have plans to do.
Okay.
That we didn't do yet.
Okay. Skydiving.
Okay.
Still haven't gotten my license.
So that's something you've been wanting to do
for 3 years.
Yeah. So that one, like,
yeah.
Okay, the number is like financial.
Yeah.
What's the comparison?
I compare the time
which is
and
number.
The prioritization. If I'm going to go re-get my license, so I like skydiving, I'm experienced at it, but not on the civilian side. Am I really going to spend weekends and nights jumping out of airplanes when I could be growing between the ears, coaching at the gym, helping out with dinner, watching the dogs, driving the kids around? Like, so am I really going to prioritize?
and for everybody is like, sure, identifying some of the things that, one, like what you're not doing that you know will help you grow. And for you, like, so the skydiving, like, part of the growth in that is probably back to the original thing with The Office, is feeling like it would help you grow a tremendous amount if you felt like you deserved things.
Yeah.
Like on a personal side, and also that does spill into your work. So
yeah,
that's really like the growth. And so looking at that matrix of like, okay, well, so is growing worth it to me? And not that it's about getting it back to a number, but ironically, skydiving, which you can't measure your happiness, or, okay, I just gained 20 points of more in like the self-deserving bucket.
Yeah.
Ironically, those kinds of things, being joyful, being happy, celebrating yourself, will probably result in some positive things that actually, ironically, are measurable. But
right. And there's also something about, well, you said two things, but there's one thing about, like, if that is really then a hobby, and if that is something that I do value and do want to experience. I mean, for us, like, boundaries practically don't exist, so that's a struggle. So this is something totally out of the norm, you know, with the F your fun shirt or whatever, or no fun. And this has been something we've talked about for a long time, but it's like, I don't find what people generally will say is fun often.
like going out for a drink,
Yeah.
going dancing, hanging out.
I like hanging out, depends. But like, yeah, I don't know, like parties, like, oh, that was so much fun. What was fun about it?
Well,
I'm
you
not
don't
really
dance.
sure. I don't dance. I do dance. Again, this is 2 episodes in a row. I do dance. I create a dance. Rachel can confirm.
A push-up.
Anyway, but what is fun to me is like doing something involving the body. It's something that's like connecting to something a little bit deeper. So like, yeah, for me, jumping out of a plane is a tremendous amount of fun. Mm-hmm. And that's only like a fraction of why I like it.
Right.
But the deserving, so I've been like working on some thoughts and writings around deserving things. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a that's a deep one.
Yeah.
That's a deep one.
And that's not, to our point before, it's not you plant the deserving seed, like I want to feel like I deserve things, and then you put the seed in the ground and there it is, there's the tree, like, wow, I now feel like I deserve things. Right. It's this uncomfortable process of growing into feeling like you deserve things.
Yeah, like, do you deserve to grow? Because if sometimes I struggle with feeling like I don't deserve things.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's what we're saying.
So then do I feel like I also don't deserve to grow?
I don't know.
No, right. So I don't. But then it's like, well, then what's going on with deserving? Yeah. And
right, so you're finding different actions, different things, outlets to build that. And so skydiving is one of them. Getting an office is another one. Not to change it completely, but like the growth piece, I think people do, like, sometimes I'll speak for myself. When I think about growth, it's like so heavy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God. And as we said, it's work and so heavy. And, you know, like whenever that was, 2 years ago when we started the Become thing, a year and a half. Anyway, like, so that's a side business.
Yeah.
Become, like BK, our initials, actually, and Olivia and Marcus, which is funny, BKOM. So the O has that like line through it, and that's like a nod to the like Norwegian culture. It's a Norwegian letter. But one of the reasons that is interesting about that is like that business, that entity is around providing growth for people by way of experiences.
Yeah.
And growth is like, yeah, learning, but it's a little less heavy.
Sure.
And so I think it's like whether you know, that's just what's cool about that is, recently I've kind of become more passionate about it as a result of feeling like yes, I need more of that for my own growth. I need more enjoyment, experience, like really appreciating what's out there, what's around me. And yeah, the boundaries and the busy, all that stuff is kind of getting in the way of that.
Yeah.
And so growth for me right now is both some of the heavier stuff, like
Yeah.
looking at some of the failure points, looking at, journaling, like discovering, but it's also in the like experiences, like making those decisions to grow in ways that aren't measurable. Like,
But
okay,
that's so.
okay, I'm going to go on a hike. I'm going to go on a hike every week.
Sure.
Well, show me how that's going to help Morristown get new members.
Yeah, where's the data?
It's not.
Where's the
It's
science?
not. I don't know.
No.
But if I'm feeling like I'm taking time for myself, I'm more fulfilled. Actually what's funny is in the Become newsletter, my first one,
Very nice.
there's actually a article that points to the Norwegian expression or concept of, it's called like free air life. That's the literal translation.
Free air life.
Yeah. And what it is this like cultural thing from when Norwegian babies, kids, are like damn near just able to like walk, but even before then they're in backpacks. They are exposed to nature.
Yeah.
That is part of their upbringing.
Right.
No matter who you are, even if you're a little less fit, more fit, older, younger,
Right.
everybody gets out there, and because there's this like thing with nature that does help us as humans. There's another word for it in English that's about nature connecting that they talked about at the do. But like, so what are some of those growth things too? Like considering all of the things, it's not just it's 360 degrees of like what helps you grow, not just the like, all right, let me like do the work, get the book, read the thing, listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Uncover,
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. The heaviness of growth can be, or the perceived heaviness of growth can certainly be a turnoff. And, I think that's one of the things I'm trying to back away from or undo a little bit with Between the Ears, because at first it was like, I don't know what I'm getting into, but like somebody approaching it would assume it's going to probably be crazy hard and whatever, and gonna yell and scream, and I had a skull and crossbones as the logo. Like that didn't exactly do any favors.
There was some blood on the Between the Ears flag. Remember that?
Yes.
Go on.
At least it was my blood. Anyway, you threw me off.
When Between the Ears started,
Yeah,
growth
so
is heavy.
it's like oh god, like I want to get better, but I don't want to do some crazy shit. It's like it's honestly not. And I think that trying to write that now, hey, initial impressions and stuff, like my parents used to tell me, like, you only get one time to make a first impression, and I think there's a lot of validity to that. But then you also have, you can also try to
Change the story
a little bit and have that. So, but anyway, the heaviness of the growth. If I guess if the topic of personal growth is so heavy, then it's like, okay, let's just like step away from it a little bit and rethink about it of what's something that how can I make a small change for a big impact that helps.
It's like an
helps my life,
enhancement.
yeah. And I think when it comes to growth, also the way people view growth is that I have to build something, grow something from nothing, or something that is not already there.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true. And what that article about in the Become newsletter I really liked was that the Norwegians also have this way, and I think the quote, the one of the paragraphs said this, is like, they live in a land that is beautiful. They've been given that.
Yeah.
How dare you squander that? How dare you like complain that it's not a tropical island?
Right.
Yeah, well, you're in the Arctic Circle, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So to complain about the lack of palm trees is not cool, and they really honor that. And they realize, are you crying?
No, I just got like emotional.
Oh my god. What's this watery discharge coming out of your eyes? And so for them to say, we have, as human beings, we have a duty to respect this land, honor this land, and have free air life or whatever. That is amazing to me.
But what's funny about that is we do that kind of stuff, like, and we're guilty of it. Like, instead of looking at the positives, instead of looking at what we have, it is a huge, I mean, it sounds obvious, like, no shit, but like, yeah, talk about stunting your growth when all you're going to do is look at what's missing.
Yeah.
And the scarcity.
I mean, yeah.
Well, we don't live in Norway.
Right.
So F that, like, it's not, I'm not traversing a fjord and looking at the, like, feeling like I'm on top of the world when I go to Jockey Hollow.
Right.
But is that what I'm going to, is that really what I'm going to focus on?
But that's when you go back to the fucking comparison. And that's a comparison, it's a stratification, it's a filing, it's a number, whatever it is. There's some sort of a metric there versus being like, I am in the presence of 1,000 species right now. Yeah. That if I were to actually think, like, how did they get here? It would blow my mind. So we do have that. And so, you know.
But can you, like, so the comparison thing, because I think that's a huge thing that just stifles. So we identified, like, yep, growth can be limited by, like, the metrics, the comparison. Mm-hmm. Like, that's something I definitely, like, that's a huge barrier for me. And so the thing is not to just, like, ignore it.
No.
Like, well, I used to, whatever that is. A lot of times it's comparing to ourselves. What is the strategy? You're like, so it's not ignoring it, but, like, to grow beyond comparison, comparing to other people, comparing to your own things, comparing to whatever. I mean, don't you agree that comparison is kind of the death
what was
of
it?
growth?
Teddy Roosevelt's a comparison is the thief of joy, right?
I mean, not like what's the fix for it. I mean, I understand that, but, like, okay, so going through that process, identifying it, and then you just kind of identify it, but identify, like, okay, I'm making a comparison and I want to focus on the present instead, or on me, or, like, what's the...
Okay, so
like, I mean, you can use an example or not.
I'm not sure you actually asked me a question.
I did. Do you want to rewind?
Rewind. How old are you? You're showing your age, Campbell.
Like the tape.
Yes.
We can use our fingers to roll the cassette back.
Yeah, the cassette back. Oh my god.
I'm going to make you a mixtape after this.
The jewel case.
It's just going to be all like Alice in Chains.
Good. So I think, let me just see if I interpreted your question right. If you find you're getting into a scenario where you're kind of becoming just paralyzed by comparison, or you're beating yourself up because you are like, cool, I've got the awareness part of I'm comparing. I see that I'm using numbers and better than or worse than or not worth it or whatever.
And it's really hampering my growth.
How can I right the ship? Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I don't know for, like, hypothetical person what is happening there. But one of the ways that I have found it to be helpful personally and in some clients is that when we're in that, okay, we're in our rational head.
Okay. Look at your son.
Okay.
He loves it. Okay.
Come on, not everybody's watching us. When you're in that,
that licking noise was our dog.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're in your rational head.
Okay.
All right. Even though you might feel frustrated that you're not making progress or that you've lost progress, you're still very much, like, in your rational mind.
Okay.
Okay, so
it's happening in your head. There's these
it's happening.
numbers and
Yeah,
quantifying this versus that.
let's look at the gym. I used to lift 400 pounds. Now 200 pounds is hard.
Right.
Okay, that's like the little stimulus that you're in that's driving this. I'm not good enough. Whatever.
Right. That's the metric that's telling you you're bad. You're
there's
weak.
a metric. There's
you're
a number.
Not athletic.
Yeah, there's a number, or there's a greater than or less than type comparison that originates in your rational mind and pushes you to fabricate some feeling.
Got it.
Or some emotion. And again, this isn't like advice, but this is just something I think that can be helpful.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing on the action of what's happening or the comparison.
Like the lift.
Yeah. Instead, look to connect to an attribute. Because an attribute...
Like, so what would that be with lifting? Or with this example?
Okay, so let's just say you had a 400-pound back squat.
But it looked awful.
Not even that. Okay. You squatted 400 pounds.
Okay.
You maybe had an injury, maybe had a kid, maybe had a life change, maybe got sick of squatting, maybe whatever. Maybe you did want to refocus on your technique. Right. You come back onto the bar and you're like, all right, 200 pounds. Damn, like that was hard. I used to do double that, and the comparison of the numbers and the whatever, instead, if you were to focus on an attribute about yourself, like you are here right now working on your squat.
Sure.
You are being resilient given your situation that you've been through, come from, whatever.
Right.
You are committed to moving your body with good mechanics so that you can be healthy for the rest of your life and not be in a chair. So looking at the attribute, and then what is the attribute? What is the attribute / like what's a feeling that kind of drives that attribute within you, like a virtue or something? Not, I'm not as strong. Strength is a measurement. Like that is not the thing. So looking at the attribute also requires you to take a very humanistic and personal approach. And the only way you can identify an attribute is to go within yourself. And within there is like comparisons don't exist. There's not, they certainly can, but like they're not driven by external data, numbers, comparisons, metrics, that kind of thing. It's an easy thing to say, but like, yes, you're no lesser of a human being because you can't execute a movement in the gym. And I think that is like very well kind of understood. The gym is also a little bit of, I think, low-hanging fruit, but I mean, it's the space we're in.
Yeah, but I mean,
but it's very real.
Yeah, one of the major things, like, especially for women, is like, I used to be leaner, thinner, whatever. And that is a paralyzing thing because there's constant comparison, there's constant metrics, there's how your clothes fit, there's what you look like, there's what people say, and you might be someone that didn't really enjoy living life, counted every nut you ate, and looked like super lean, but now you're maybe not as lean and you're enjoying living life. You have a piece of cake at a birthday party, you're learning to like, you know, but identifying like, okay, that comparison, like what, so the attribute is like valuing myself for more than my leanness, enjoying life.
Yeah, and I would say like look at the attribute, characteristic, virtue. Like let's not get spun up on the word, like the semantics. Look within yourself and identify basically who you are and who you are being. You don't say I'm being a weaker person. Like you understand, like that's just clumsy. That's not happening. If you look to go within and be like, I'm going to attach to, or I'm going to open up that emotional mind and look at that. And like you can find something because where you are, you're there. You can find something. I guarantee you can find something positive, something wholesome, something that reflects and is representative. And so you can find who you are. You might have to look hard. You might have to sift through like, nope, not that, nope, not that. And that's where the mindset component of it being a form of self-communication is the guide.
Yeah.
I never paid attention to how much women said, I want to get my pre-baby body back, until you really kind of like came back from birth fit and we started doing that. And I
You don't know anything.
I literally do not know anything.
What? Okay. Go on.
What I was going to say was I try to not speak as an authority or as a opining on something, because like I don't want to be misunderstood or honestly speak ignorantly or whatever. But like, you're never gonna get your pre-baby body back. Sure. And I don't, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be like the man speaking to the woman. Like, there's a lot of that stuff going on right now. But just by way
of physiology, you've given birth to a child. Your
right.
body
so
is
it's
now,
like
you're never gonna get your pre-puberty body
right.
back.
Like, you want to get your pre-baby body back. So are you gonna trade your baby in?
Right.
Because that would, like, if we're going logically, that's what would be required. So like.
Right, and then that is, I mean, and that's where, like, for me, the birth fit stuff, as I've talked about, like, really opened a lot of things up for me in terms of, like, the women's stuff, not just with, like, postpartum women, but, you know, we've talked about this, how women are definitely just different. Their set of experiences, and then you add maybe moms as a subcategory of that.
Yeah.
And, like, you just look at that, the comparison that's just...
Sure.
Like, sure, that logically it's like, okay, I know that, but there's a lot wrapped up in there. And so now you've gone through a pregnancy. Yeah. Your body has done...
literally the most amazing thing.
Yeah, but, like, it's changed. And talk about growth. Like, every day your body's changing. Every day you feel different. How you feel, inside, outside, how you look, like, all the stuff. You are completely out of control of what's happening. For 9 months.
But you also satisfied the entire purpose that you're here on this fucking earth.
Yes, Bill.
But like, I'm just saying.
But I'm saying, just because, but that's back to the rational thing. Like, that's fine. You can say, like, wow, this is amazing. I'm creating a human. You're still allowed to feel like, wow, I look like so swollen and like. So,
I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying though, like, I'm highlighting the thing that, like, rationally, you look at them like, you just made a miracle. You were, yes, you made a miracle.
It's like, and right. So I think, so there's that.
But yet it's like this, like,
Right, and then there's, and not to do this, but there is a lot of societal pressure until I think recently we're like trying to change that. Yeah. But like, yeah, the expectation to like get your shit, like there wasn't even like, the father or the man or whatever, like, I don't want to know about all that other stuff. Like, well, you just birthed a human out of a crevice. So there's probably some stuff that's going to happen. But like, just keep that to yourself. Like, we just want to see the nice, the female, the feminine, the woman, like all the good stuff about being a mother. Right. So I think that there's a lot there with women and their experiences and then comparison and that's like a huge, to kind of go back to what we're talking about, for women, like, not to categorize people. And I'm sure men have a whole category of kind of general, like, growth. But for women, like, that is a huge thing of an area for growth to, like, not do the comparison. What I was like before I had kids, after I had kids. Women, I talked to someone recently that, a friend and member and BTE, practice person, talking about women and responsibility and how that's such a tough thing. And so I think there's a whole set of, like, nothing's as simple as like, I'll just identify that I'm comparing and move on. And so I think there's like a lot of growth around, looking at all those things. Comparison and where, okay, like what am I comparing? Is it to myself? Is it to all these other people? I mean, yeah, that's a whole, we keep saying this, but that's probably a podcast that I should do on my own. But, yeah, like, Olivia recently had kind of a little tiff with her two girlfriends, and you and I talked about it, that like, that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Females, women.
You guys are ruthless.
Yeah, there's like a ruthless element. And so, of course, that comparison, you're comparing to yourself, you're comparing to them. There's always this comparison going on. So I think, yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot of growth to be had just in that in general. Comparing how you look, how you're mothering, how good your lunch looks. I mean, there's a whole thing with like posting the lunches that you made for your kid on Instagram, so that basically everybody else can feel bad if they don't have a bento box of organic, grass-fed, paleo, whatever for their child. So anyway, just I think the comparison thing is definitely like a big one, and especially for for women. And that's been something for me to, like you said, not to ignore, but to look at that like rational versus finding an attribute about myself to make some.
Yeah, so focusing on when that happens, don't look at the action, look at the attribute.
Yeah.
Find an attribute within yourself. Yeah. And it's hard. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Do it then.
Right.
And I think that's also part of what, that's, I think, an untapped element of our day-to-day that we can do, that we can actively jump into a little bit more. And I think part of it is the practice between the years strives to uncover some of this and then provide opportunities to kind of like then spread the seed and water it and watch it grow or not or whatever. And I think that where we're sort of movement also is a way to do that, because there is so much tied in. The body and the mind are connected. And when we do tap into certain types of movements, we get these experiences. The Chinese have been talking about this for thousands of years, mapping the body and all of that. And that's what like Richard at the Strong Fit, he's like all into that. But yeah, like they've like the Eastern, maybe not just the Chinese, but like the Eastern cultures, and we look at movement, and frankly, a lot of it's external ego.
Yeah, sure.
And so there's so much there. And I think that what we're doing more and more of is getting into that and trying to share that, and really like working with people who they're like, hey, I want to feel like I'm good. It's like, right, we have to have a couple questions, not even a couple questions, a couple things that we need you to do. We need you to sleep and recover. We need you to feel yourself fairly well. And we need you to move. We need you to pause, and we need you to like have some time for yourself.
Right. And that's a lot. That's actually really hard.
That is a lot.
Those aren't like, yeah, got it.
Right. It's not like,
I got one.
Yeah, but you know what's better? 60 days to flat abs.
Right.
Boom. I can just take that off the shelf and whatever. And it's like, yeah, sorry. So when we then look at things like where's the numbers and the comparison and the data, well, the measurements, it's like, right, because it's all marketed as number result, number promise. And it's like, really?
Yeah, and that is the interesting thing with growth. Like, so working with like Kyla from Strong Fit, that metric, and starting to look at like when you have the wrong metric. I mean, that's what you're saying. Like, the metric isn't, like, you're looking in the wrong place, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And starting to...
Did you count your reps today?
No, what is funny, so we worked out, and that's been something I've been doing, we've been trying to, like, no data.
Yes.
But for having done data for now 20 years, counting 3 sets of 12 or 50 box jumps, whatever, And we've talked about this too. Like the mind likes to, and
I don't know when that stopped.
and entered in all my little numbers, and there they are in the sheet. You know, and you know as well. Like I've gone back. I have all my numbers. I have all my benchmarks and times, and going back and being like, wow, I recently, not that recently, but did some 400s or something. And like what's funny about that is, or no, I know what it was. It was Nate. We did Nate.
Yeah.
We programmed it for the gym.
Yeah.
This was maybe like last year.
Yeah.
I remember it was hot out. And I felt really good about it. I felt like, wow, I really like felt my glutes, felt my hamstrings in that kettlebell swing. You know, sometimes I can feel like the kettlebell is in charge, and I felt like I'm moving this thing. Yeah. My muscle ups felt good. I felt really good about myself. It's like, wow, that's great.
Nice.
Then I started thinking, I wonder if that was like the best Nate score I ever got.
Right.
Was it? And then I'm like, well, I have that number. Right. I'm going to go back, got my computer out.
Right.
Find Nate. Found it. Wasn't the best score. I had done it with you. And all those feelings, I was like, wow, I suck.
Yeah.
Like that's literally what my process was. And then I'm thinking, this is insane.
What did you feel if you remember, and if you're like, hey, I don't know, then don't answer. But
like when I actually felt like I did well.
When you felt like you did well, what was that? Like,
I mean,
what
I
were
think
some
it was probably like
there?
I felt strong. I felt like I worked hard. I felt like I had been, like my movement was good. You know, I felt like the effort. I felt like I was, some of the attributes, probably like hardworking, committed, you know, like persistent. I was persevering, like all that stuff.
Right.
And I was.
And you, for sure, because you felt it.
So.
But then you looked at the action.
Right.
And compared.
Yeah.
And completely dismissed the attributes that were very much real.
Right.
Because a spreadsheet said that you did 2 more rounds.
And here's the thing, not that and it doesn't, even if each of those movements were exactly the same, the point still remains I shouldn't have done the comparison, or that's not helping. But what's funny about that is I'm pretty sure actually and the reason we've said this with comparison in the gym, for example, or not in the gym, that's a problem is it doesn't, when you narrow it down to just a number, there's so much not accounted for. Like I can tell you for a fact, my kettlebell swings probably were actually like good kettlebell swings. They actually were probably over my head, and I actually used my hamstrings, my heels stayed down, all that stuff. Like it's not a full picture either of like your progress, and we've talked about that as it relates to the gym. I want to do a benchmark. I want to see. Yeah. And you've said like, yeah, it'd be funny if we did like you get like a number for quality of movement. Oh,
I want to do it.
And the reason for that's partly because you're kind of like a little bit of an asshole with that. But
excuse me.
So like if you do Cindy, but your squats are shitty and your push-ups are crap. And
you didn't do it. No, I'm
sorry.
So
like you're getting like, you got 15 rounds, but like a -10. That's your.
No.
What's it called?
It's a multiplier. Quality of movement multiplier. Okay.
So you got like really a 2 or something.
What? No. You would have gotten a 0.1.
Okay.
So if you got 15 rounds of Cindy,
but your movement was
like
crap,
an asshole, I would have said, hey, nice job on flailing around. You just earned yourself a 0.1
Okay, so what if you moved really well? Impeccable movement was like...
Then you get a 1. Then that's the score.
Okay,
then you get a 1.
Got it. So the point in that is someone doing Cindy for the first time ever, or, just not knowing like good mechanics, and then they repeat it, they still got the same score, but it's not at all the same. So we can't just look at the numbers.
Here's the thing. When we compare, we do math. It's a math problem. All it is a math equation. All right? You were a 10. You look back and shit, you were a 12. 12 minus 10, 2, whatever, or 10 minus 12, whatever. It's a math problem. However, it's not just a math problem, because then we create a fucking English and a literacy problem. And we have this whole writing about it. And we create this story. And it's like, no, if you're going to compare, then and you're going to compare. But if I were to say, hey, what's the difference between calculus and War and Peace you would be like, those are two totally different things. And yet, when we compare, it's not just about objectively, data-wise, I was this, I was that, graph, chart, math. It's like, okay, there's the math, and then there's this novel, this story being written to talk about that. And it's like, it doesn't happen. Math is...
So, like, to kind of bring it back.
Yeah, let's wrap this up.
So, growth, I mean, that was like our thing. I think you and I, different areas that we can focus on, but some of the things too that we're sort of saying is, one, it's not an overnight thing.
No, it takes time.
Two is,
it's also an active.
Yes,
it's an
you have
active,
to take some actions.
It's an active thing, and we can improve, I think, by just checking ourselves when we're looking at it retroactively or in the past.
And some of the things that you struggle with, yes, they will probably continue to be there, not to ignore them, but to identify them. And then the sort of looking at the metrics and the comparison and how much that's kind of getting in the way.
Yeah, I think if you feel like you're not making growth, or if you feel like you're at like a sticking point and not moving forward, I would suggest take a look how much numbers are in there,
right,
and how much comparison is happening, and not even from a like personal, like not, it's not even personal comparison. It's like going for a walk in the woods is not a good use of my time. That's a comparison.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting for us to look at some of the stuff after this call, after this podcast, about like what, like that's an interesting exercise. My sister who listens had said it would be cool to suggest like an exercise or a homework or a writing thing.
Okay.
With the podcasts.
Okay, cool.
Kind of like you do with the newsletter.
Yeah.
And I guess for this, that would be an interesting exercise for someone to do, is to look at like, am I in a growth process? Do I feel like I'm in that, like, yes, I'm growing. Like, what would lead me to believe that?
Okay.
Or, wow, I kind of feel stagnant.
Yeah.
Am I falling into that kind of like, I'm busy? Like, if you can't really remember what happened last week, maybe you're just trending towards like, I'm just kind of...
Yeah, three things kind of come to mind as it relates to what we just talked about.
Okay.
One is and this is for you to explore.
Yeah.
We don't have the answer. What's the difference between growth and growing?
Okay.
Like for you in your life.
Right.
Write about it. What's the difference between growth and growing? Number two, looking at if you feel like you're not growing or you haven't experienced growth or whatever, if you know maybe like what you want to grow in, and if you know what's good for you, but you're not actioning it, can you try to replay the tape, or over the next week be aware of the conditions at play when you decide to not act? What does that conversation look like?
So like me not going for a walk in the woods, just being aware of like what's happening,
why did you not walk? And it's not a
it's not a judgment, but it's just
it's not a judgment. And in the coaching profession, they say don't ask why, because it gets people defensive. You're not on trial right now, right? But like, what was the situation? What was the environmentals? What were you thinking?
Yeah.
What was the conversation like?
Okay. So that's two.
That's two. 2B would be like, are there numbers and comparisons within there?
Okay.
3, how can you focus on and express attributes, not just actions, when we're in this kind of a thing? Or like, look back at some of the times you're like, man, yeah, like I know I said I was going to go to the gym, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And if you're not, like, what are some, instead of looking at the action or the non-action, what are some attributes that you can express there? And yes, it's going to drive an action. So don't get me wrong. This isn't about like just, feely good stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to drive an action. And I'll just say, like, that's why these life hack things are full of shit. You know, oh, all you have to do is put your running shoes next to your bed and get dressed, and like, yeah, that might help, but that's not the fix.
You putting your clothes on in the morning is probably not, like, the fact that your clothes aren't right next to the bed is probably not what's hindering your progress.
No.
So I mean, it's so I think that's really good.
Yeah, I think that's good. If anybody is still listening, questions, comments, concerns, please let us know. Email is great. If you can leave a review. Oh, we got a couple reviews. Did I say that the last time?
No.
I looked at it maybe after. There's a couple reviews. Yeah, like, subscribe, do that whole bit if you don't mind. YouTube, we have that whole thing. January 1st, new practice. New practice group. It'll be, which is really cool. And then February, keep your eyes out for a Between the Ears seminar.
Cool.
Which is going to be cool.
Very good. If you'd like to visit Bill at his office, you can also reach out to him. And
yes.
It's hidden.
It is hidden, and I'm not going to tell you where it is. So don't reach out to me. All right.
And I'll try to remember that T-shirt. Man, it was a good one. I'm like, I've got a whole line. I got to jot these things down. My age is really the old brain.
Yeah.
It's like a sieve.
Okay.